Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6:30 p.m. on March 19th, 2024. Ki Sukyukit, we acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukanamakas, the unceded territory of Yakut Atnukliat. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakut Atnukliat and are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. Before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to congratulate our Ghost Riders on winning the Eddie Mountain Division of the KIJHL. A great performance, and kudos to both teams for representing their communities admirably. So I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for approval of the agenda and any late items. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. I'll now ask for a mover and a seconder for that the minutes of the February 20th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. And a speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. And I would ask if there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to speak. And seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Rhodes if there's anyone online who's indicated a desire to speak. Okay.
Your worship, it's just a reminder that the public participation period is to the committee of the whole meeting only, not to the special meeting afterwards. And therefore it's to the pavement assessment or potentially to either of the delegations, but generally matters of agenda for council.
I appreciate that. With that, we'll promote Mr. Inglis and he can.
Yes, good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, good evening, Mayor.
3 minutes.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and public. I didn't have a chance to look over the agenda. Unfortunately, I was in the air. I'm just clarified from your corporate officer. My comments or questions are to do with the budget, so that would be at a later time. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Inglis, and I'll turn to Mr. McConnell.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Worship. The financial plan bylaw will be back next week for reading. And if council moves first and second reading, as soon as that time, as soon as first and second reading is done, there will be another opportunity in that meeting to receive public participation to the financial plan. So there will technically be two opportunities for this public participation, but we would ask that persons who wish to comment to the financial plan do so in the second period when it's opened up.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Is that clear, Mr. Inglis?
Yeah, the second period, do you mean like tonight, the second after
no,
this?
That's at the regular council meeting next week.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. You all have a wonderful day, and hopefully the weather stays the same. Enjoy your night.
Thank you. You too, Mr. Inglis. Anyone else? Ms. Rhodes? Thank you. And so we'll begin with our first delegation, a delegation by our Tourism Fernie Executive Director, Yika Gayorki. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All good? Excellent. Thanks for having me. So thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for allowing me to speak today. and bring you a draft of our 5-year plan for your feedback and support. Every 5 years, Tourism Fernie, as the eligible entity for the 3% MRDT, the hotel tax, Tourism Fernie is required by the province to undertake a renewal process. The 3% is collected for the purpose of spending on tourism marketing programs and initiatives. This process includes developing a 5-year plan based on tourism industry input, trends, data, strengths, opportunities, and challenges. The purpose of the plan and the process is to confirm this renewal of the tax for another 5-year term. And as mentioned, we do this every 5 years. And for this time, we're covering the periods of 2025 to 2029. The draft plan is provided to all key stakeholders for review and input before the Board of Directors of Tourism Fernie finalizes the plan for submission to the province. Tourism Fernie is currently in the review and feedback process, and thus today's presentation to you. Prior to this submission on May 1st, which is an earlier timeline than normal because there's an election this fall. So prior to submission on May 1st, Tourism Fernie also requires 3 key actions to accompany the submission to the province, in addition to the 5-year plan once finalized. These are a sign-off by commercial accommodators that collect the hotel tax and have over 4 units. There are approximately 20 commercial accommodators in Fernie, including Fernie Alpine Resort. However, although the province technically only requires a minimum of 51% approval of the accommodators, our renewals to date, and this is my 4th, our renewals have always been 100% supported by accommodators. We also require, as part of the renewal, a resolution from the City of Fernie, Mayor and Council, to approve the renewal, and a motion from the Regional District of East Kootenay Board of Directors approving the renewal as well. The draft plan provided today is built following provincial requirements, and it consists of 2 parts. It starts with a high-level 5-year plan, including statistics, key learnings, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, goals and objectives, and an outlook on revenues and expense allocation estimates. It ends with a high-level first year, so 2025, first year draft tactical plan that lays out current plans for major categories of spending. I hope that you've had the opportunity to review the plan leading up to tonight's meeting. And I thank you for all of your support and time to date in the many years, for the many years today and for the many years that we've existed since 2007. Tourism is Fernie's key economic generator and has been a part of our community for over 100 years. The MRDT, like the RMI funding, provides our sector and community with $1.5 million annually, funding that supports investment, business growth, jobs, tourism amenities, and infrastructure, events, and much more. This funding also helps us leverage much more funding for important initiatives. An example is the $1 million in grant funding towards our sustainability projects the last 2 years. Did you know that tourism industry in BC contributed more value to the BC economy than any other primary resource industry? This includes mining, oil and gas, forestry, and agriculture. We're all fortunate to have these funding sources and ongoing collaboration across the sector. In 2023, lodging revenues were over $37 million, another growth year for overnight visitation. And it's estimated that our visitor spending in Fernie is over $200 million annually, which is outside money coming into our community. This doesn't include the millions of dollars businesses are investing in their own establishments and for creating new opportunities. Tourism Fernie expects to see growth continue, and as such presents a plan that sees a more balanced approach. We no longer focus all our resources on marketing Fernie. We also balance it with new destination management and development. This critically important element that supports on-the-ground sector, community, and visitor experience initiatives. Tourism Fernie has been evolving into destination management and development more heavily since the launch of our tourism master plan in 2020 that you guys helped partner with us on. We see destination management and development initiatives as collaborative in nature and essential to the long-term sustainability of the industry, which relies on local businesses, the land, the river, the residents, and all the amenities and infrastructure that support it. The plan we present provides clear objectives and directions while at the same time allowing for flexibility and nimbleness as we build our annual strategic plans each fall season. Overall, our goal is to grow and strengthen Fernie's year-round tourism industry and economy. Our industry is built from our community, our people, our local businesses, and the environment around us. The sustainability of our industry relies on collaboration, professionalism, and respect, and I will always acknowledge that. And I hope you see that in our plan. I will end my presentation with a request to Mayor and Council to make a resolution to support the renewal of the 3% MRDT for another 5 years and to seek feedback on the plan. I thank you for your time and support over the years, your worship, councillors, staff, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Gyorke. Questions from council? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Can you just remind me what Fernie's catchment area is for the MRDT?
Yeah, so it goes as far down as Birch Meadows Lodge, so down past Morrissey, no, before Morrissey, I think, and then all the way up to Hosmer. And so it includes from Dickon Road, Hosmer, obviously the entirety of the city of Fernie and Fernie Alpine Resort as well. And that's why we have to seek approval from both local governments for the process.
Other questions? Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just wondering, I remember last year at the AGM, the fellow from the Sea to Sky was mentioning our rates in comparison to other areas were lower. And I see here that you have, you know, the stats show that again. Is there any opportunity for that to increase here to be a little bit more comparable to other like communities?
Absolutely. And that is one of our strategies for this year and looking forward is one, playing an educational role with our accommodators as what are competing hotel room rates in other destinations that are comparable and where there may be a gap or leaving money on the table for our destination, because obviously it brings more money into their pockets, into the community, provides more MRDT, and MRDT growth grows the RMI pot as well. So everybody benefits from that increase. So we definitely see that as a key strategy. And as you'll notice in the plan, we've started to really start to analyze those numbers a bit more and capture more of that data. And you'll be seeing more of that analysis to come. Yeah.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just going through the package, Ms. Gyorke, you did mention something called as, you know, a high yield visitor. Like, what does that mean? What does your high yield visitor look like?
It can look like many things, but ultimately our high yield is one that has the discretionary income to spend in all facets of our business community. So not only spending in overnight accommodations, but being able to dine in our restaurants, being able to participate in activities, you know, whether it's winter skiing or snowmobiling to summer rafting and biking, to shopping and retail, into retail stores. And that requires, you know, a certain level of income in terms of a target audience. So we tend to focus a lot of our marketing into markets where we know that they can actually come to Fernie, that they have enough disposable income to spend money in our community.
Other questions? Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm just trying to understand the MRDT stuff. And I know that the 2021 guidelines say that they state that the MRDT can be used for affordable housing, but in the report here, it says we can't use it. Is there a reason for that? We says we won't, and it's been updated, I think, a little bit. I'm not quite sure, but the OAP, which is a portion collected from the short-term rental platforms, so Airbnb and VRBO, the government has allowed communities and MRDT eligible entities to be able to look at using those funds for affordable housing initiatives.
we have yet to see support from our industry to use those funds for affordable housing, and they've been a small portion of the MRDT. We would rather work with our stakeholders, and that's why we sit at the Housing Solutions Working Group to find money of a significant amount to actually support and partner with that can actually make a difference than what the OAP revenues of the MRDT could do. And that's where we feel is our best role to play with the housing, because workforce housing obviously is important to us because the tourism economy is very much reliant on frontline workers. And given the labor shortage, which obviously has a tie to housing and affordability and supply of housing, that we've been at the table since Your Worship created that working group to find out where can we play a role as Tourism Fernie in that process. And one initiative is the Chamber of Commerce put together a funding application to do a workforce housing business plan, of which they've received funding, and we had also committed finances to support that workforce project because it definitely plays a role with the tourism sector. So we feel that, being at that table, finding those partnerships that are meaningful, and then finding out where and how we can support further, grant writing and other projects to be a part of.
Other questions? Just an observation to that point. I had a conversation with an ED of another not-for-profit on the weekend, and their first question to all prospective employees is, do you have a place to live? Because they can't continue if they don't. It's frustrating for them, for sure.
Yeah, and having had the opportunity to sit on the Housing Solutions Workforce, I'm very optimistic with the projects at play in our community and the ability to start really addressing the demand for rental housing. So it's looking very optimistic, and I commend City and City Council for that work.
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry, Councillor McIsaac, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I was just thinking about Councillor Ramados's question. I decided I was going to ask you a completely unfair question. The accommodation revenues rose significantly over the last couple of years. Thinking about your high yield person, and appreciating that this is anecdotal evidence from talking to businesses on 2nd Avenue, where they've seen sales lower over the last couple of years. And I'm wondering if you want to speak to what your theory is on how we're getting more and better, higher yield customers in our accommodations, but not seeing the reciprocal increase in money being actually spent at our retail businesses. I appreciate this is not necessarily your area of expertise, but
no, it's been very much brought up with our organization, and because we've obviously, and I've been with Tourism Fernie since 2010 and have seen the evolution of the MRDT and the sector growing, including the different business sectors in tourism, so retail, food and beverage, and having across the new challenge for our community, which was the TC Energy pipeline project, and seeing how much that project benefited the community, but also created a bunch of challenges as well. We saw both sides in our sector. And what we heard, because we had surveyed our business community after the first year TC was here, that yes, they filled up a lot of beds in our community, and that was great. And they brought in a lot of money, spending a lot of money in many businesses in our community. But there are seemed like a certain types of businesses that are more tailored for the visitor type of spending than worker spending. And that's where, from what we heard from the business community, is where they saw the difference. Is that, and when we had the pipeline workers in, they were most times on site, working on site and not in the town, spending money on activities and shopping at retail. And because they took up up to a third of our bed base, a lot of the business community did notice that. And we we did our best with the Chamber of Commerce to identify, well, what services do they need as pipeline workers, that we articulated to the business community as best as we could. In terms of like, here are some things that they're going to need, how food and beverage with their timing was going to work, when they were going to have days off, encouraging TC Energy and Soraya Murphy to like encourage the family to come into town when they're on days off, we communicated that as best as possible, but we still, in the end, obviously did see some of those differences. And if we see a project like that come in again, we have a lot of knowledge now going into it in terms of, what could we do differently that could support those businesses that didn't see the benefits as much as other businesses. I don't know if that answers your question.
Other questions? Sorry, Jacob, when do you need the resolution by?
So we were not technically supposed to have it in until June, but the province has come back saying, can we have it May 1st because there's a provincial election?
Okay.
So technically I have to submit all the paperwork by June or by May 1st. So I would need a resolution in paper form before that date. And then, of course, I'd be happy to continue to answer any questions, whether it's tonight or looking ahead with regards to the plan or any other feedback as well. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just a comment on the report. I very much appreciated it. It felt very honest to me. Clearly it was a dynamic strategic planning session. And the one observation I made was it was celebrated that we're not a mass tourist destination. Mm-hmm. And yet in the SWOT analysis, it was seen as a weakness. So, I appreciate that because that is exactly, there are different mm-hmm. perspectives you bring to the table to build the best possible strategic plan. So I appreciate that we're getting an honest look at your strategic plan. So thank you for that.
Well, and thank you for being a partner with us since the beginning and continuing to be so. And I really appreciate the time and dedication you put into your jobs.
Oh, you're very kind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will ask Mr. McConnell, can we have this on the agenda for our next council meeting?
Ms. Georg-Garicki and I have a conversation tomorrow to discuss next steps, as well as staff input to that particular resolution. So we will be having it on in time for the deadline. We've had lots of communication around ensuring that we get a resolution before council to meet their deadline.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on, item 6.2, a delegation presentation by Dandelion Renewables. Mikhail Ivan Chico. Am I getting that even close?
Yes.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me today. Today I would like to talk about electrical vehicle charging stations. So some of you know Dandelion Renewables been active in renewable energy in this area, particularly solar. My background is in wind and some other renewable energy sources. And last couple of years, we've been fairly successful deploying electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. So we started a company that's called Evolution. We created the network of chargers. And last couple of years, we've been extremely successful working in Alberta with municipalities. And that's kind of the passion and the reason why I would like to present this presentation here for your community. I'm very passionate about creating a model that can work for municipalities in British Columbia as well. So our experience, we created over 30 public EV charging plugs for municipal clients in Alberta. We built 6 EV charging plugs on the Accelerate Kootenay program in British Columbia. We own and operate fast charging 4 plugs at Trans-Canada Highway And that project integrates both EV charging and solar. It's quite unique. And right now we designed and in construction stage for 600 kilowatt fast EV charging infrastructure on White Avenue in Edmonton. We one of the certified Power partners in Western Canada for deploying fast chargers. So that's kind of a brief introduction for people who not familiar with us. And the idea, so first is why I would like to present municipality and why I think municipality needs to play a role into building the EV infrastructure. And the reason has been that over the years, we see shifting from fueling locations. So it shifts to residences, workplaces, food recreation, and highway facilities compared to just gas stations. And that's a completely different concept compared to fueling combustion engine vehicle. And that requires kind of different planning, different approach. If municipality, what we find in Alberta, for example, if municipality is not involved in building infrastructure and relies on private businesses to build it, then municipal facilities or users of municipal facilities who drives electrical vehicle would be occupying parking spots and amenities for commercial, so which is not ideal or not optimum. And also, I kind of look at municipality as the leaders actually in the area to show perception of electrical vehicles and deployment on that. That's why, you know, I think it is proper for municipalities to consider what kind of role you would like, or ask the question, what kind of role you would like to take in that changing world. Let's put it this way. So this is kind of why. Now, what we're proposing is we looked at around in terms of what would be a potential good location, and as you can see on the previous slide, so this is the future skate park in the city of Fernie, and we recognize it that as a very good location for potential deployment EV charging because it's close to downtown. It's just right next to BC Hydro substation. Hydro BC substation. It's under construction, so it's still possible to build that infrastructure as the skate park is been in that stage. So what we're proposing is 2 fast charging, each plug up to 150 kilowatt, and also combined with level 2 chargers, because this park, the skate park, is located close to the trail system. So users could choose between fast charging versus level 2 slow chargers. And our company would have experience and would take a look after the application for federal and provincial programs. We would engineer the system. We would manage and pay for BC new hydro service. This is going to be the 600-volt new service. We will look after the project permitting. We would supply and install equipment, and we will provide technical support and EV evolution network ongoing. So essentially, I look at this opportunity as whatever municipality may potentially doesn't have experience with, or something new, and put you guys outside of the comfort. That's what, you know, we proposing to take care, so you don't have any headache related to that. And from city's perspective, so what we would be needing is, in order to qualify for the programs, we would need 20-year land lease agreement to essentially deploy those charging infrastructure. So it's a very small areas where the charger is going to be located. You can see, for example, on the picture satellite, that each plug going to be rated to 150 kilowatt. This is Power, so this is a small footprint. And maybe I can go a little bit on the previous slide. So the level 2 charger, consider it to be on the closer to us, like it's a white location, because that's where BC Hydro has existing service, single phase service, and then the fast charger could be located on the other side, further side of the parking lot, closer to the 3-phase power line located there as well. So it's kind of from both ends. So from city's perspective, what would be required is also designate 4 parking stalls, 2 for slow charging and 2 for fast chargers. And then I already saw that you guys installed the lighting and there is some sort of pavement. So that's, I think, in plans already. So that would be required as well. And then snow cleaning in the winter, which is a parking lot. So I assume that is taken care of regardless. From financial perspective, what it would look like is that our company will take care of all the costs, all the project costs, including costs for the new BC Hydro service. Also, we would cover all operation maintenance through the life of the project. Also, we're willing to take on for the current single phase service for lighting because that's the service that can be used for the level 2 chargers. The voltage coincides, so we can look after that power bill as well to the certain extent. So we need to discuss in terms of what's the growth, electrical growth consumption of the park is going to be. And then city completes, the lighting is already installed. I understand it's not connected probably yet. And pavement needs to be either fixed or, just tied up a little bit, I guess. The pavement is there already. And then in return, what we're willing to pay basically 10% of the session fees revenues to the municipality. So it would look like win-win for everyone. And again, like the return on investment would be based on the applying for the federal and provincial programs and applying for the claiming the carbon offsets from this project. So it does look financially viable currently. And so one of the programs that we've been successfully applying for last year, it's called Plug-in BC program. And it just reopened as I prepared presentation on March 12th. And the window for application for that program is up to, we would like to get things kind of application prepared and approved by May 10th. So that's the time frame. And in order to arrive to that point, we would just ask for basically just any questions regarding two things. So we do need to get an estimate for the new connection from Hydro BC Hydro. And we need to kind of letter of support for the program, so we can apply that together, like as an entity together. So so I expect probably the program would consider application for plus minus a month. So in the middle of June, we can get approval for the funding, and at that point, the final decision could be made. So at this point of time, it's non-committal. So it's kind of an optionality to actually, be successful in the program. But the funding agreement for both us and the city decision point will be sometime beginning of summer. Once the funding agreement is signed with this program, the construction timeframe should be 18 months or less. So within 18 months, the project needs to be constructed. Based on the current timelines for BC Hydro to put the new service, I do expect that most likely the project going to be for the next summer season. Thank you.
Thank you. Well timed. You had 23 seconds left. Well done. Council, questions, comments? Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So just more questions to staff. For the proposed area, do we clear the snow in that parking lot? Okay, and just another question as well. Is the construction completed in that area? So, is it already done? Is it like we've already paved it?
I will have to answer that question one moment, specific to where it sits in priority order on the snow clearing map.
Oh.
The majority of the paving of the parking lot is completed, though. P5. That is a P5.
It's a P5.
So that's late in the day, as they say, or the week. Yeah. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. As far as the 10% lease back or payback for the charging rates, what does that estimated to look like as far as a dollar figure? Are we talking dollars, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars?
So based on our estimates, it's going to be thousands of dollars potentially significantly growing in the future. And the big risk in all those projects is what's the forecast for increase of EV vehicles on the road. So it is it's educated guess that, but that's the base case scenario in the financial model is going to be several thousands of dollars per year, and it certainly our expectation is going to significantly grow. The need for this project is that there is very limited infrastructure close to downtown. I drive electrical vehicle for many years right now, and I do prefer to stop at the places where I can walk, where I can do things rather than just sit in the vehicle. So I do think that this location is unique, and for that reason, it would be more preferable than other chargers. Plus, another thing is that other chargers, existing chargers, they limit it to 50 kilowatt, except the Tesla fast charger. So again, for non-Tesla vehicles, it's going to be a unique opportunity to park close to downtown and get charged at the same time, and maybe go for coffee and for the meeting.
Councilor Ramadus.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wondering, how did you arrive at that 10% figure?
It's financial models. So as far as I know, other models where other companies deployed their EV infrastructure, there was no payback to the municipality. So I guess it's up for negotiation. If something changes in terms of favor, so we would be willing to share more benefit. It's just we build financial model in such a way that it makes economic sense for everyone. So it's win-win for everyone.
Councilor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. So if I'm to understand correctly, we're not paying any cost for these except for providing the space where they sit and then ensuring it's plowed to get there, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Assuming the lighting and the pavement is already in the budget, then I don't foresee additional costs. And we would like, for the carbon credit reasons, we would like to take over the electrical service that you will have for the skate park for the lighting. So we're willing to pay that bill as well.
Mr. Boranowski.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Stasha and say that it is a priority 5 parking lot that's identified outdoor recreation areas, off-street parking in the historic downtown area. The intent of this priority 5 area is to identify areas that may receive snow and ice control services when resources become available. It is, however, also right along the snow dump access route. So it is trafficked and opened, although not regularly cleared in the same way as core municipal facilities would be.
Thank you. Councilor Nixon and then Councilor McKaiser.
I'm just wondering, another question to staff. Do we see another place for this to be, for these 2 chargers to be put in? Is there another opportunity other than the skateboard park?
I think I'd like to take that away and have a discussion about it rather than just answer from the floor.
Councilor McKaiser.
Thanks, Your Worship. And I think this has already been answered, but I'm just going to ask for my own edification here. If that lot is a P5 over there right now, we're plowing it at when we reach that point in the schedule, regardless of whether there's EV chargers put in there. So that's already on the schedule to be done, correct? Yeah, so there's literally no change in order to accomplish that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councilor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. So just a few years ago, I came back from a road trip and I saw all these chargers all the way through the BC and stuff like that. And I was like, why don't we have any chargers here? And now we have 18 chargers, right? 6 Tesla charger, 2 level 3 chargers, and the rest of the other ones, or the other 10 are like a level 1 charger. So I think it would be really advantageous for us to have these 2, these fast chargers in the downtown core. It brings people, we've always been trying to bring people off the highway to the downtown. And I think that this might be one of the tickets. Now, we have a 23% adoption rate in BC for electric vehicles. So I think that we're just going to see growth and more demand in the future.
Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Ramadas.
Two things. So just to echo what Councillor Nixon is saying about bringing additional chargers downtown. I've been doing a lot of reading personally about that and where EV chargers find the most success and where communities and businesses find the most success with them is when they're within walking proximity of a destination. And it's a total mind shift change or a different approach than your your internal combustion vehicle where you go to fill up and then you leave. You plan it that you go and charge and go for a coffee, go for a walk around. So I really like this idea. Question, I'm not sure if it's for staff or for Mikhail, but if we do go ahead with this, what would the cost or the likelihood of opportunity of adding solar generation to a project like this, particularly with the roof over the portion of the skate park and adding photovoltaic valve, you know what I'm trying to spit out, there to complement this?
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent question. So today I just drove to the location to see the scale of that structure, and I was pleasantly surprised. It's quite significant. It's facing southeast. There's certainly potential to put solar. It's not optimum, but because the structure is already in place, and it's kind of new idea. I just need to flush it out. Potentially, we can access more funding. Potentially, it just opens up more opportunities. I can only say that on project that we own and operate, that we invested, we bought the land, we built 2 fast chargers on Trans-Canada Highway. It has trackable solar. And the way how we've done it is that the capacity of the charger increases at the time when the solar is available. So we have kind of unique product that we done to dynamically change the capacity of the chargers. So we can implement something like that. But I do need to, get a little bit back to the numbers to confidently say this is a good idea or not a good idea, whether it's going to add to the cost. But certainly that's a possibility to cover the entire surface of that roof with solar panels.
Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just have a question for staff here. Are there any other organizations coming to the council also with similar proposals in the future?
Not to our knowledge.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Actually, in the vein of Harshan's questions there, through the mayor to staff, under what regimen are the current chargers installed? Who paid for them? What deal is there?
We received a grant from the Ministry of Tourism called the Tourism Dependent Communities Fund grant. It was a tourism recovery grant to develop new infrastructure to encourage visitation when the pandemic was at its first height. And the application was to develop chargers, install chargers and improvements to the staging areas, both at the Visitor Information Center and at City Hall. That grant also funded improvements to the Ferry Creek Trail, some interpretive signage, the new welcome sign, and a few other sundry items, as well as a sculpture that should be installed soon at the Visitor Center. But that was provincially funded. And then it also was installed in partnership with the Community Energy Association, who were able to leverage that funding and access some additional funds to increase the number of chargers that were available there.
Thank you very much. I would say, why aren't these guys doing all of our chargers?
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Question, I'm assuming it's probably through to staff, but would the city have any ongoing legal or administrative costs with a 20-year lease? And what might that look like?
There would be legal costs in terms of developing the lease and executing it and monitoring it, but it all depends on the terms of the lease, whether there's specific obligations that we would have to undertake. Snow clearing would be one of your administrative costs, managing that. That's about it.
Well, with that, I'll say thank you for that presentation. You've clearly intrigued a few people around the table. And yeah, the question about solar has maybe given you a bit of homework, if you will. But thank you, Michaela. It was very, very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
That moves us on to item 7.1, the presentation by our Manager of Public Works, Ms. Zellinger. Pavement condition assessment. A riveting title.
Is that better? Can you hear
It
me?
is.
Okay.
Thank you.
So why was a pavement condition assessment needed? Pretty simply, replacement previously has been done on age, and a 10-year maintenance and rehab plan of our paved roads allows us to prepare for the future of our community, and the plan enables us to invest with substantial confidence to create our long-term financial sustainability. Age isn't the most accurate parameter to replace and rehabilitate pavement with, and our IICP needed to be updated with substantiated data. What were the deliverables of this project? These aren't all of them, but these are the main ones that I think you as council would be concerned with. Firstly was the state of our roads, and the scope of work to give an analysis on the state of our roads was based on many parameters, including ride comfort, surface distress, structural adequacy, and overall pavement condition of town. The second part was to prep the data to be uploaded to GIS. And then lastly was a 10-year rehabilitation and maintenance plan. So a question I thought you might have is, how would a segment of pavement qualify for maintenance and rehabilitation? First, the consultant calculated our pavement quality index, and our pavement quality index is based on surface distress, riding comfort, structural adequacy, and a PQI trigger. So any PQI less than 55. The major influencer of our PQI value is the surface distress index. And then next they went into predict the performance based on deterioration models. So the deterioration models, which are in the plan, section 4.2, are based on our environment here in Fernie, as well as index curve sets. So there's a lot of technical terms, and it is a very technical report. So if there are specific questions to what those mean, I'll try my best to answer, but get through this first. After considering that, the consultant needed to determine a need year. So the need year was based on the pavement quality index deterioration curve and our pavement quality index minimum of 55 years. The given year that a segment reaches that minimum PQI is termed the need year. After that, an estimate was made on construction year and the remaining service life. In summary, the key takeaways are from the analysis were that 34% of our road segments are in need of rehabilitation. 40% of those are locals and 29% of those are lanes. That results in funds needing to be invested to maintain or improve our level of service. This is the map of our PQI, just kind of a snapshot of what I just explained, the 34% of roads needing rehabilitation. And that is in Appendix E if you want to reference it later. So our budget scenarios that were presented, there's 4 main budget scenarios. Our first is do nothing, which would mean our pavement quality index would drop to 31%. Very high risk. We probably don't want to do that. Our deficiency would then be at 92% in year 2033. Our second option would to be maintain the current pavement quality index of 61. That would involve investing 7.2 million over the next 10 years, and our deficiency would go from 34% to 28% by 2033. Next is reaching a pavement quality index of 75, which would cost 12.6 million to be invested over the next 10 years. This would be set amounts, pretty even amounts over the next 10 years, and this would leave us with a 2% deficiency by 2033. And the last is the need driven, which would cost us 11.1 million over the next 10 years. And that would also bring us to a 2% deficiency in the next 10 years. However, that would require an initial investment of 6.3 million. So the need driven budget recommends 1.1 million annually to reach a pavement quality index of 71 by that's a typo. I'll have to look it up in section 6, but yeah, 2% deficiency by 2033. So our current budget status, 2023 reserve balance is 601,000, and we currently contribute about 700,000 a year, which is 524,000 less than the recommended 1.1 million from the consultant. The city, according to our Director of Finance, can currently afford to maintain a current pavement quality index of 61. With all that, there were a few other recommendations from the consultant. One was to review our treatment types and costs annually. They also recommended we consider ground penetrating radar for further substantiated data. And lastly, continue to survey our road network regularly. How does this plan align with the corporate objectives? Well, in summary, our entire community depends on the road network. From school buses, emergency vehicles, snow plows, visitors, and everyday commuters. This is a non-negotiable service that we have to continue to invest in for the well-being of our city. I want to say thank you to Stantec for their work in providing the data we need to future-proof our community. And thank you to the CAO and our Director of Finance and Director of Engineering and Public Works, as well as you, Mayor and Council, for sponsoring this project. This analysis has given my team the support to confidently move forward in the rehabilitation and maintenance of our road network. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. That was actually terrific report there. We really enjoyed it. Not everyone was lost there. I do have one question, Manager. Like when I was looking at this cost effectiveness table, 7.1 or something, is the higher number means it gets a higher priority or higher number means lower priority?
So I did ask the consultant that number of cost effectiveness. My assumption was that the lower number means better cost effectiveness. So like rate per quality. I got a hold of him today and he didn't prepare the analysis, and he's going to get back to me tomorrow.
Further?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm also kind of intrigued. Why did First Street and First Ave show up as high on that list? I've been here only for 12 years, but isn't that one of those really neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of traffic and a lot of businesses or community there?
Like I said, the pavement quality index is based on a number of indicators. So I would have to look at specifically the PQI that came up for those two. But I can get back to you on that.
So, well, just further to that, so it could be something as basic as the quality of asphalt used at the time or the quality of road base.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And the integration into the IICP will help us look at, yes, these are the recommendations from the consultant, but also what does our underground infrastructure look like and how will we go about prioritizing those as a whole instead of just the pavement quality.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Fun little anecdote about the quality of the roads. Yesterday morning, we were walking down the street in front of my house and my daughter was having fun jumping on the road and watching all the bubbles come out from all the cracks in the street. But I do have a question, not being an engineer, not being overly technical and looking at all of the graphs, but with the, let me just read my notes. The deterioration in the cycles to the mean, I can't remember which graph exactly it was, 4.2.3 deterioration curve, sorry. How unique or how much consideration or play into those curves and how we rank on that does our climate play into that and how we calculate that with our frequent freeze thaws? Like, do we fall on those graphs pretty standardly, if you will, or do we get quote unquote special consideration?
My understanding is the program that Stantec, our consultant, used called Road Matrix, used our local environmental systems as a consideration in those deterioration curves. What those look like, I couldn't tell you. I'm not an engineer either, and by no means an expert on pavement conditions. So I can ask if it was set to local as in, you know, the East Kootenays or local as in Canada. But I'm pretty sure they used as close as they could get with their software.
Further?
I would be keen to know that, because I mean, if they were going local as in BC, we've got quite a variability in local climates here. And I guess my concern is that we are basing the deterioration model off of something that isn't actually accurate, and that we should be expecting a much quicker deterioration in these roadways.
That's a very fair point. I can get back to you on that for sure.
Further? Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I just thought of something and just about the gross vehicle weight and stuff like that. I know that Cranbrook just instituted something that said you can't have up to a certain weight on the roads. And I'm wondering if do we have that as well in our town? I haven't really noticed because I just drive my bike.
That's one of my projects. So yeah, a road restriction policy is something that's been on the administrative project docket for a couple of years. And there's a lot of communities to pull from with that. It's just having the administrative capacity.
Yeah, fair. Even Anderson Road currently has a weight restriction on it.
Thank you.
Councillor Amanis, did you?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just with regards to the ground penetration radar, if we do have it, did I understand it right that you can actually start surveying more frequently through the year with that, or is it something else?
The ground penetrating radar was something that they recommended as further our data, or I guess substantiate the data. It's not something that we've done. It's something that we could do if we budgeted for it. And then the third recommendation, which was to continually survey our road network, was kind of what they had done, but continue. And you see this in many communities where they'll continue to do that and upload new data every year or every other year or every 4 years, depending on what the community needs. But yeah, those are kind of two separate things. Like getting our road network assessed with GPR would be kind of a separate project. And of course they would come together, but yeah, they kind of meant two different things there.
So that essentially would use ground penetrating radar to map the same 61 kilometers and see what the subsurface looked like.
Yeah.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, a couple for me. You mentioned GIS, so we would enter this data, we will at some point into our road network, and we can pretty much track the PQI value per meter of city streets. Is that sort
Per
of the thing?
segment,
Per
yeah,
segment?
but yeah, that's the plan. The data has already been submitted to us and it's just kind of waiting to be integrated at a later time.
Okay, and how long is a segment? Just so I sort of understand, is it a block or?
I think I can get back to
Oh,
you.
fair. Yeah, it's not a critical question. I do recall that vehicle stopping in front of my house about 3 o'clock in the morning last year, and this metallic thumping happening, and wondering what was going on. And I know now what it was, of course. The notation that 34% of our roads currently need rehabilitation, but that's not a blanket statement in terms of it's varying degrees of rehabilitation, I take it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And the last one, sorry, was just a alarming figure in the do nothing budget scenario. The PQI will drop to 31 and deficiency of 5% will increase to 92% over 10 years. I mean, that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other
Agreed.
questions from council? Councilor Ramirez. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that. No. Okay. Psych.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm sorry about that. I was just, maybe it's a question to the CFO here. There was like discount rate 2% on cost and everything. Like, what's the discount rate got to do here? Like,
my best guess would just be in terms of our planning and with investing our reserves and giving us a little more math to work with in terms of how much we should be putting away to afford these various plans.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, while I have the mic, I felt I needed to qualify my statement that we can afford it, and I was really just basing that off of table 5.12 on page 88, using those numbers in that table.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly can afford it with our current levels to reserves, but I can't. I just wanted to preface that by saying I can't speak to the accuracy of their costs here. I don't know if they've factored in our local climate and whatnot, but thank you.
Fair enough. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Not a question, but just a comment. I think this is excellent, and I'm very excited. Pavement is a good thing, and we should be really excited about it because it's way better than mud. Thank you.
Councillor Burkhardt.
Thank you, Worship. I wasn't going to say anything until the CFO brought it up, but no, I'm really skeptical of that table 512, I have to say. For one thing, it shows decreasing costs year after year going up to year 2033, which seems like astonishing just thinking about inflation alone. So yeah, I'd be very interested. I mean, if that's the maintenance cost, that's probably very good. But yeah, it does seem unlikely that our costs would go down on an annual basis in order to maintain, just knowing that things cost more every year. But as you say, though, these are their numbers. So,
Councillor Audie Kelly and then Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wondering, Manager, if you had mentioned that as we rehab, I'm going to use that word, we gain in percentage of, I'm going to call it good roads as a layperson term. So perhaps is that estimate based on the fact that we're having more good roads as we go along, so therefore there's going to be less maintenance because there's less roads to maintain?
I did bring up the question about the cost estimates at our closeout meeting, and the recommendation was to update the cost estimates for local pricing of rehabilitation costs. But your point is a great question that I will ask the consultant.
Yeah, I think that is a very good question because there's a deflection point in there somewhere where, there's diminishing returns in terms of now you're actually, the amount of roads are deteriorating faster than you're rehabbing them. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Sort of orthogonal to Nadia Kelly's statement there. Perhaps they're just planning that we front load with the worst fixes first. I wouldn't really know, but I'm really eager to see this sort of cost corrected for our area. And I do know that this is a pretty important issue to a lot of people. So,
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. And that's kind of where I was getting with the First Street question.
Mhm.
Like, is that, I know the data says that's priority number, whatever, number one or whatever the numbering is. But is it the right place? Like, it's, I think we need to kind of pressure test this with the knowledge that the staff has on where. Did I miss something here in the report? Was there any mention of traffic analysis or anything of that sort, or it was just purely based on the physical characteristic of the current
So the
infrastructure?
falling weight deflectometer, which is the structural adequacy test, was done on the roads with the most traffic, not on all the roads. So that index wouldn't have been used on roads with less traffic. That being said, like, even though they have their recommendations, this still needs to be integrated into the IICP, because we're not going to go and rehab or replace roads that we know the infrastructure underneath needs to be replaced with. So it's a good snapshot and it gives us a lot of data, but we're not going to blindly follow this as our plan moving forward. Like I said, having that overview and large scope is the plan.
Excellent. Yeah, and integrating with it to Councillor Ramdass's point earlier, with our own understanding of the state of roads and traffic.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
use, et cetera. Yeah. Excellent. Any other questions? Councillor Shoesmith.
thank you, Mayor Milligan. I'm really happy that this conversation's including the subterranean infrastructure as well. That's excellent to see.
Made me think of mole men. Sorry. Thank you for that, Stasha. That was very useful. Sorry, Ms. Salinger.
Thank you.
That moves on to item 8.1, correspondence. There was the UBCM summation of the minister's response. Any comments from council? Councillor Ramirez.
Another enthusiastic no, it feels like, Mayor Milligan.
Well, it felt a bit like there was process attached to it, but whether we see some results from that, I guess, remains to be seen. Yeah. I did. Yeah, I did too. I tried not to be cynical about it, but it felt like it's an issue that's come before the minister before, and consequently is actually going to put some effort into seeing that it can be resolved. Councillor McKaiser.
Yeah, and just thank you, Worship. I thought I would turn my microphone on since I was talking. I was just going to say that, you know, this was an item that did come to them. It came from multiple communities. It came out of the AKBLG to them and so on. So I feel like they heard it fairly loudly. I don't think it's by any stretch of the imagination a high priority item for them, but my read of that was it wasn't a polite no. It was more a case of it's on the table. We're not sure how it's going to come out yet, but
yeah.
So I read that a little bit more optimistic, which is unusual for me. I'm generally cynical of these things.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Seeing none, with that, we will adjourn committee of the whole, and we will take a 10-minute recess, Ms. Rhodes, before we convene the special meeting. Thank you. Welcome back and welcome to those who are joining us for the special meeting of Fernie City Council held at 7:51 p.m. on March 19th, 2024. And once again, we acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakutat-Nucleat. We recognize that we live and work in their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat-Nucleat, are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I will call the meeting to order, and I will ask for a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And that moves us right along to presentation by our CFO, Director Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Good evening, Council. I've got about 20 slides tonight, summarizing the last 3 budget meetings and also introducing the Excel tables that would form the meat of this year's budget bylaw, which then form the base of our operational and capital plans for the year. Quick agenda. I would like to start with a few slides that I presented at the open house on the 29th of February, and then I'll present the aforementioned tables from the draft budget bylaw for initial readings next week. A quick recap of our major upcoming projects, our funding shortfall for 2024. And a lot of these slides, this will be the 3rd or 4th time Council has seen most of them. So as always, please interrupt me with any questions if I'm going too fast. This is our budget schedule with the tonight arrow pointing to March 19th, where we're asking Council for direction on the preparation of a budget bylaw. This would then go for 1st and 2nd readings next week, 3rd reading on April 9th, and adoption on April 16th, which is a month in advance of the official provincial deadline of May 15th. But remember that we also have to do readings of the tax rate bylaw immediately after this budget bylaw. Before May 15th as well. And so the readings and adoption of that bylaw are scheduled for April 23rd and May 14th council meetings. But quickly to summarize again, what is a municipal budget? Very simply, it's determining how much money will be raised by the city and how much money is spent and what it is spent on. At a high level, the budget is split into 3 major sections. One is the operating budget, which is our day-to-day budget. And here would be expenses like wages, benefits, insurance, utilities, repairs, operating supplies, and so on. Next is our capital budget. Capital defined as larger expenditures that the city plans on using for a period of time longer than 12 months. A few examples of these would be any vehicles that we purchase, any official plans that we use, like the official community plan, playgrounds, new buildings. The 3rd section is our utilities budget, utilities being defined in this case by water or drinking water and sewer. Both water and sewer have their own operating and capital budgets, and the reason they have to be split out from the regular operating budget is just because they're funded from a different source. They don't get any money from property tax, they get it from our quarterly utility bills. And as I learn more about this process, this is my 3rd budget process. I intend to do utilities kind of separately, maybe in the fall going forward, because that just times better with our annual bylaw reviews and the new rates coming into effect January 1st. Just for council's information on that. And so a municipal budget every year must be done via a council approved bylaw. This budget bylaw must be for a period of 5 years. And so at the moment, being March, we're still using last year's 5-year budget bylaw to drive our operations. And again, these bylaws must be submitted to the province every year by May 15th for review. A municipality's budget must be balanced, not like provincial or federal budgets where they're always talking about surplus or shortfall. We don't have that option. And so really our only 2 options when it comes to balancing our budget is either by raising the amount of revenue we bring in to meet increasing costs, or by finding and utilizing new and efficient ways of doing things to reduce costs. And since I've been here, we've been doing both of those things. So for this year, at a high level, this is our revenue slide. How much money are we expecting to come in? And I just want to make the point that for anyone that may be watching this online for the first time this budget season, this slide and the next one do have a lot of numbers on them, and each individual number has many smaller multiple numbers that add up to that number. And I don't want to seem like I'm intentionally going too fast here, but if you are curious to see more details of these numbers, there's an additional 10 hours of budget meetings that we've gone through together that are online that you can watch. So our biggest source of funds is property tax, which comes from single-family residences, businesses. We get a portion of the property tax paid to the province by the coal mines in Sparwood and Elkford. Special assessments are various parcel taxes we collect. An example of which is the parcel tax on West Fernie residences, which is collected to help pay off the cost over 30 years of their sewer infrastructure when they amalgamated with Fernie in 2018. Emergency services is the amount we get from the regional district to provide fire services at the ski hill. Garbage collection is also part of the quarterly utility fees that residents pay. The next 8 lines, from arena rental to curling club rental, is the amount we raise from our programs and daily rentals at those various facilities. Permits and licenses halfway down the page are mostly related to building permits, development permits, engineering review, business licenses, and so on. Fines, mostly made up of parking towing fees and animal bylaw infractions. Rentals would be our longer term rentals. So for example, most of the long-term tenants in the Max Turk building or the courthouse, which we rent out to the province. Income on investments, which is fairly self-explanatory. We get most of our revenue in July. So the portion of that money that's to be used for the rest of the year does earn interest until it's spent. Penalties that come from late tax payments go into city's general revenue. We do also earn interest on the amounts we have in our reserves, but that revenue is recorded in the reserve itself and not on this particular line item. Miscellaneous revenue is for smaller services we provide. For example, really old pieces of equipment sometimes go to auction. We also issue tax certificates for a fee is another example. Unconditional grants is a grant from the province called the Small Communities Grant, which we get every year, and there's no restrictions on what it can be used for. Grants and conditional transfers are grants that we've been awarded that do have a specific purpose. They're usually put towards a capital project, but we do occasionally get an operational based grant, though the operational ones are usually quite small. This year, one of our bigger grants is for the Mount View Dike project that we were just awarded last fall. We have other smaller grants for projects like Fire Smart. And then transfers from reserves is money we pull out of reserves to pay for capital projects that year. So all told, our 2024 budgeted revenues is just over 25.1 million. And now how much money will go out? I won't go through all these lines individually. But essentially, whenever you see a specific building, location, or asset, which for the most part is the top section of the right column and the bottom section of the left column, starting with sidewalks, streets, and so on. There's about 35 of these on this list. The numbers in each of those rows are the costs of running and maintaining those assets. So it includes things like salaries for our staff, insurance, utilities. The top section of 9 rows in the left column is, in essence, our administrative section. It includes items such as council salaries, salaries for finance department, including myself, AP, payroll, cash receipting, front desk customer service, purchasing, maintenance management. Corporate admin is in there, which includes HR, communications. Also council meeting support, like setting up this room every week is in there. Asset management, which is the 4th row there, is a department of just 3 people, but the main cost there is actually all of our computer support, maintenance, software subscriptions, and other things like that. The grants line is our community partners, which are the library, art station, senior center, visitor information center, and museum. So that lines our annual contributions to these 5 groups for their operating costs. The second section on the left column is protective services, which includes fire, RCMP, and bylaw. Then there's building, planning, and inspection section for that. There's also a section for our engineering, safety, and the rest of the team at the ops facility. Lastly, the gray section at the bottom of the right column is the interest and principal we pay on debt, the amount we transfer annually to our reserves, the amount we intend to spend on capital projects this year. And then the dark gray line at the bottom right is our projected shortfall for this year, which is just over 531,000 for 2024.
Sorry, Director Burdick. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director, CFO, can you give me an idea of what our shortfall trend line has looked like for the past, I don't know, say 5 to 8 years? Like, is our shortfall pretty static? Is it increasing? Is it diminishing? Just curious.
Sure. Thanks for that, Councillor Audie Kelly. The shortfall this year is lower than it was last year. Last year it was 580,000, and now it's 531. Before that, it was slightly lower. The 2 years prior, we needed a 5% tax increase, which would have put the shortfall at just under 400,000 in both those years. And then prior to that, well, there was the first year of COVID where we did the 0% tax increase, and that was also when there was a significant turnover period in the finance department. And so that was a difficult year to do budgets for sure. And then prior to COVID and prior to all that, the shortfall would have been hovering around 180, 200,000, which would explain the typical 2% tax increases. So it's been trending up, but this past year we're seeing it go down a bit, and then obviously hopefully continue to go down in the next few years. So then what happens with that shortfall? Again, the budget must be balanced. And so if that shortfall is funded purely through a taxation increase, that would translate this year to a 6.1% increase. Again, last year's, for reference, was 6.8%. And both of these two numbers, as I just touched on, while historically would be considered high, it's worth mentioning that they're actually one of the lowest increase we've seen in the province for these past 2 years. Obviously, every municipality is different, but it's worth pointing that out for sure. There's a bit of money remaining in our COVID restart grant, just under $300,000. That could be used to help offset this difference, which, as we've discussed before, is really just delaying the difference by a year. So what I mean is if you were to use that money to reduce the tax impact by 2%, then that money isn't there next year to use. So you would immediately start at a 2% deficit in 2025.
Sorry, and I know you've explained this to me before, and if I can borrow from Reddit, maybe you need to explain it to me like I'm 5. But so that's money that we received as a grant, and it is set aside, and we could hang on to it this year and do nothing. Or as I think, as you said in your report, we could put it in reserves, underfunded reserves, for example, or we could use it to reduce the tax rate. So given that we will, so it's money we've effectively got in the bank. So if we spend it this year, how does it create a deficit to begin 2025's tax year? Help me understand that.
Sure. Firstly, it can be used for items that help us get back to pre-pandemic service levels. So it can't really be used to put into reserves, but what it can be used is to offset the increasing costs at the pool. And then if you were to then keep the tax rate increase the same, that would give you more money to put into reserves. So we're not using this money to put directly into reserves. We're using it to offset. So then the second half of your question, if the city's annual budget is $100,000 and the costs have gone up this year by 5%, so now our budget's $105,000, if we use $2,000 of this grant money to reduce that tax impact by 2%, next year our starting line for costs is already at 105,000. So we've only raised 103,000 in taxes. We've used 2K from our reserve to make up that difference in 105. So now you've got 105 in costs, but you only have 103 in revenue from your 3% tax increase. So you have to make up that 2% somehow, like right off the bat.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That is helpful. Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So that COVID money cannot be directly put into reserves, but can it be put into paying for half of our city works money that we need to pay back the $600,000?
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. I will confirm this for next week, but my initial suspicion is that no, because it was mainly a operational based grant and not so much paying off capital projects, especially one that was built before COVID was even thought of.
So, yeah, sorry, Councillor McIsaac. Yeah.
Thank you, Worship. Sorry, Councillor Nixon's question just spawned a question in my mind. And this is perhaps a little bit to do with how we do municipal financing, but even if we had that money, are we actually able to put it directly on, or are there penalties paid for early prepayment of a loan, for example? I don't know if municipal financing follows the same as like regular loans and so on, but that's often the case. So I'm just curious.
That's a good question. Thank you. There's no penalties for early payment with the MFA. I'm speaking just with respect to short-term loans, which is what this one is. Yeah, I mean, like there's no payment schedule at all. So what we've been doing is once the calendar turns, is we've been paying that $600,000 right away just to save on interest costs for that year, if nothing else. Yeah, so we could pay it off tomorrow, I think, with no penalties.
Councillor Adia Kelly and then Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, just what you were saying there about the operational versus capital. So just could we use that COVID money, say, on our fire hall project, or is that a capital project so we maybe can't?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Adia Kelly. Mr. Bornowski is going to research it a bit more and hopefully get an answer for both that and Councillor Nixon's question tonight.
Thanks,
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, I know we spoke about the impact of inflation in our previous meeting, and you said you will have some slide with an educated guess of what that impact was. Is there a slide that shows that?
Thanks, Councillor Ramirez. Not tonight, but it is on my radar for next week's presentation. Yeah, thank you for your patience.
And sorry, not leaving the COVID monies yet, but so you said you could use that money to offset increased costs, for example, at the pool, and then use that money that would otherwise be spent there, put that into reserves. Are you listening? Sorry. And does that create the same structural deficit going into 2025?
Thanks, Mayor Mulligan. Yes,
it does.
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Yeah.
So any spending we do to offset our costs in 2024 will carry forward into 2025.
Yes, and I just so make sure I'm understanding. You're asking if we offset our pool costs and then keep our tax increase the same and put it to reserves.
Yeah,
that would still defer. Yes, if you kept the same level of contribution to reserve the next year, because you'll still have that shortfall in the operating funds.
Right. Okay. Did you have your hand up, Councillor McIsaac?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, it's not the same if we kept the same tax increase, right? In the previous example that you gave, where the tax increase would actually be lowered by using it, we would now have that tax increase plus whatever next year's is to leap up. We wouldn't have that same ground to make up because we would have had the tax increase this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not quite the same, but there's still money to make up.
Yes. And yeah, I see that now. Thank you.
And to build
Mr.
on that,
Burger,
you would have the extra flexibility of being able to decrease the reserve that you increased the prior year.
Right.
Because you, as Councillor McIsaac said, you would have that revenue coming in.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Ramos, did you have a question? No. Okay.
I mean, again, all of these are estimates, right? Like,
Yeah.
come next year, things might change too. You might be in a situation where inflation goes up and you have higher expenses, or in the opposite case where it might come down too.
Yeah.
So the delta could be anything. This is just the best estimate that the CFO has at this point in time, if I get it right.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm just sort of trying to understand the the structural differences we might make in our 2025 budget by moving that money around in various configurations now, if you get what I'm saying. Councillor Audie Kelly.
This is a little bit, again, estimating. So say we go to a borrowing referendum for our fire hall, and as I recall, if we needed to borrow 10 million, that's going to cost the average taxpayer in Fernie $273 a year, I believe was the figure you gave us, CFO. And that will be then on top of any tax increase that we impose.
Thank you, Councillor Audie Kelly. If we borrowed 10 million over 30 years at current rates, oh, that's the wrong spreadsheet. Which at the moment are still 4.2%. The annual payment for that loan would be 592,000 over the 30 years, which is roughly the same as our ops facility loan payment, as you know.
Other questions at this juncture? If not, we'll carry on.
Okay, thank you. I do have the eligible use of the COVID funds here, which I will read. They do say include, but are not limited to, but it says facility reopening and operating costs, emergency planning and response costs, protective services and bylaw enforcement costs, programs, vulnerable populations, which it's not really a sentence, computer and other computer and other electronic technology costs, budgeted revenues that have not been collected. So it's still remains pretty vague, but in general, those are operating based things that they've described there.
Thank you.
Okay, so that does remain there as an option. And I do have another slide a bit later to discuss these options at the end of the presentation again. So it's not going away. The other option would be a reduction in a specific service level. Fernie does own a lot of buildings, way more than the average municipality of our size, and all of them are really old and they're expensive to maintain and keep running. The decision on how to balance the budget is ultimately up to council, and it's certainly a question on council's collective risk. Councillor Ramadas made a good point that it's not necessarily a 2% deficit right off the top, because inflation could go down quite a bit. It's all a matter of our risk tolerance. After council makes their decision and a budget bylaw is adopted, the next step in the budget process is the tax rate bylaw. The city is only allowed to collect the amount of money that council has authorized the city to collect. That's really the only relevant number, that dollar value of taxation revenue. Assessment value does not matter. Our tax revenue does not go up with assessment values on top of the increase that council's approved. Assessment values are only used to help us set what the tax rate for each individual property is. in order for us to collect that total revenue dollar amount that council's approved. And I've just tried to include some recent historical math behind this on this slide. And so recently in the last 5 years, as everyone knows, Fernie's assessment values have been skyrocketing, 20%, some years 30%. Council, however, has only been approving a tax increase of 5% or last year's 6.8%. So because of this difference in assessment increases versus council's approved tax increase, the property tax rate in Fernie has actually dropped significantly in the last 5 years. In 2018, before the major assessment boom, tax rate was $3.86 per $1,000 of assessed value. Last year, it was $3.04. So that's a drop of 22% over that time. This slide explains that math in a slightly different way. For simplicity, imagine in 2023, you had a house assessed at $100,000 and the city needs to collect $500 worth of property tax. That makes your tax rate $5 per $1,000 of assessed value. Now in 2024, council approves a tax increase of 6.1%, but your house has also went up by 20% in assessed value. So does that mean you're going to pay 20% more tax and then 6.1% more tax? Actually, no, not true. You still just pay the additional 6.1% tax. We adjust that tax rate down to $4.42 per $1,000 of assessed value. So the tax rate in this simple example drops by 11.6% to ensure we only collect the additional 6.1%. And this has actually happened in Fernie each of the last 5 years. And you can see this if you have your historical property tax bills, you'll see that your rate has decreased every year. This year, however, assessments have actually only gone up by 2% on average in Fernie, which means if council approves a 6.1% tax increase, the tax rate would actually have to increase so that we could collect that 6.1%. And then this slide is direct from BC Assessment website, and it explains exactly what assessment value is used for. And it's just saying that if your house increases less than the average increase in your town, you will pay slightly less of an increase in tax than the average house. And the opposite holds true as well. If your property value goes up by more than the average, your increase will likely be slightly more than average. And so this slide would be the revenue section of the financial plan bylaw. The 2024 column has been the majority of the content presented to council at the previous 3 budget meetings. 2025 or year 2 of this budget is what gives staff the legal authority to continue operations when 2024 turns over to 2025. I think the number here that will jump out is the 10.5 million in 2025 and the 7 million in 2026. And those numbers remain a placeholder for the upcoming fire hall and the project that we call the CNL right away. And I just mean that the source of funding for those projects, while at the moment says borrowing, could theoretically still change between now and then. Notably, we're hoping to find some grant money for both of those projects.
For both based on, potential funding strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's right.
Thank you.
The other thing to note for this and the next 2 slides is there's no historical comparatives here. And the reason for this is that I'm just presenting the level of detail that council approves in the financial plan bylaw. And again, previous 3 budget meetings had quite a bit more detail presented, which does include historical comparatives. This table is the expenses portion of the draft bylaw. The increases you see here over the next 5 years, mainly just inflationary and contractual increases, assuming a continued level of service.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Returning to the 5-year income slide, the revenue slide, just for clarification for everybody, what percentage of increase in revenue is calculated for each of the following 5 years, not just the 6.1 for this year? Is it 6.1 continuously?
Thanks, Councilor McIsaac. No, I've got about 3% in there for each of the years, which is yeah,
Just as a
purely
placeholder?
Yeah, rough estimate.
Thank you.
There's expenses again, and then finally, this last slide makes up the bylaw is our transfers to and from reserves, interest and debt payments, and capital expenditures. So there was a couple of questions at the open house specifically. If you look at our expenses slide here, it says 17.5, but our revenues is 24.9, which is obviously quite a large gap, but the gap is kind of filled by our capital plan. So I did have a few questions about that. As for capital, this slide's a summary of the major projects scheduled in 2024. The largest project here, as I mentioned earlier, is grant funded. That's the Mount View Dike upgrade. There's a structural remediation project needed for our water reservoir, which I believe there's a report next week. Some sewer projects, which accounts for the, some sewer projects. The partially grant funded, super exciting active transportation missing sidewalk links project. We've got $809,000 of fleet replacement, a large portion of which is for a new grader. But if council remembers, during the capital budget presentation, there was discussion from Mr. Hausler that we are looking into a much cheaper option of essentially fitting a blade on one of our existing vehicles, so which would bring this price tag down considerably. And lastly, we're intending to roll out the curbside organics program, which is also partially grant funded. And so here again is our preliminary shortfall for 2024 and some of the increased costs and revenues contributing to that. It's just over 530,000. Again, last year was just over 580,000, which would be a 6.1% tax increase versus last year's of 6.8. So additional revenue on this slide includes additional revenue from the arena and pool, both from being open back to pre-COVID levels. Also, the increased fees in the user fee bylaw are in there as well. New construction, which is worth approximately $147,000 of additional revenue. We've reduced the amount we're budgeting for external contracts for streets and snow removal, mostly in West Fernie. The EVP TSA, which is the mine tax sharing agreement, that's the additional revenue we're getting this year from that. And again, additional investment revenue from careful cash management that we continue to improve on.
Councillor Rowdy Kelly, sorry.
Sorry, Your Worship. If Director Burdett wants to finish, then I can ask. Thanks, Director. I was just wondering, and this might, I don't know if I'm going to articulate it well. How real time is the inflation effect? Like, okay, inflation is sort of trending down. We're seeing a bit, but we've been paying bills at a higher inflation rate, if I'm making sense. So how real time does that lowering or conversely an increase like affect our budgets? Like, is it like 6 months delay, a year delay? Like, I'm trying to kind of get a grip on how much inflation hurts or helps.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's not, you can't really answer it in a general sense. It definitely depends on the expenditure line that you're talking about. So if you think about expenses like fuel, that's obviously real time because fuel prices change every week. But if you're talking about expenses like salaries, we have contractual agreements that both are just about to expire or recently expired. And so because those employees have been living in this increased inflationary environment, those those costs in their agreements are just going to start hitting us now. And so we've tried to estimate as best we could in our salary budget. So it definitely depends on what line you're talking about, but all of them in some way have been affected, whether it's immediately or we will have maybe not see for another year or two. So then on to expenses. Increased expenses are additional wages at the arena and pool in order for it to be open longer to bring in those additional revenues at the top of the page. Our benefits have gone up quite a bit, mainly our extended health premiums. And again, it's hard to quantify exactly how much of that is use versus how much it is inflation. That could be a bit of a delay on that as well. Again, contractual salary increases account for part of our increased expenses. New positions, which for this year is only the grant-funded half planner, which we talked about in a previous meeting. Our own utilities, like electricity and gas, have increased. And then lastly, a small increase in insurance for the year, which is quite a bit lower than the previous 4 years. So that's nice to see that trending a bit smaller. Oh, and then, sorry, these two categories don't add up exactly to 531,000. There's a lot of other categories, smaller categories that go into that number as well. But these are the big ones. This slide illustrates the impact of the city's budget on the average home in Fernie. Our proposed property tax increase coupled with water, sewer, and garbage amount to an additional $186 per year, or just over $15.50 per month. Last year, for reference, it was an additional $193 annually. And again, this number is just for the city portion. We also collect for other jurisdictions on our property tax bills, including school, the regional district, the hospital. There's BC assessment that we collect a small amount for. MFA gets a little bit. And the only other jurisdiction that I've received the information for so far is the regional district. And they're looking at a 3.5% increase this year. Noting last year, they were at 10.3%. The hospital, while still draft, is looking like around a 25% increase this year. Last year was 4.5%, but the 3 years prior to last year for the hospital was 30% per year. So they gave us the 1 year of lower increase. And so those two increases, again, while still draft, they amount to approximately an additional $25 per year for the average home in Fernie. And I can't remember if I said this, but the city portion of property tax bill is just over half of the total property tax bill that people pay. So feedback on Let's Talk. It was open right after the public open house and it closed March 10th. We received 23 pieces of written feedback, some major themes, concerns on overall affordability in Fernie, especially for fixed income homeowners. Excuse me. There were 2 or 3 comments complimenting the budget process, which I didn't even submit, so that was nice. There was a comment about options available to the city for providing more discounts on property taxes to seniors or those that have been here a long time. Sorry, my notes aren't clear there. And there was again a comment about city. This tax increase affects only the city portion of the property tax bill, which is correct. We just discussed that. The city portion is about just over half. There were some comments on some people would like to see increased funding to community partners. They've been at a fixed level for 3 or 4 years now. Some people would like to see increased investment in recreation facilities. Some people would like to see reduced investment in recreation facilities. And then we did ask a specific question about how people felt about increasing tax to put more money into reserves. And the responses on that were divided, almost 50-50. think there was 13 in favor and 12 not in favor. And some more notes there from general feedback. Again, affordability. There was a few notes about the lack of fire hall next steps and the related baseball diamond replacement. And while good points, I would just point out that our final funding strategy is still being worked on for that. And as part of that, there will be options provided in terms of ball diamonds. So just with the timing of this budget process and the timing of that fire hall funding strategy, it wasn't final enough to have in this budget.
And there's continued engagement with the users as well that will inform that final funding strategy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then there's another comment about just the importance of continuing to invest in asset management and our long-term planning. And so before I close, I just wanted to remind council of what I heard in the last 3 meetings were some key topics of discussion by council throughout the budget process. One, again, was the gap in reserve funding. And another was community partner funding levels having been stagnant for the last 3 or 4 years. So this slide just provides a bit of numbers on those 2 topics. Again, our gap in reserve funding, which is defined as what we currently contribute to reserves compared to the 2018 asset management investment plan, is just under $1 million, 978,000. 600,000 of that is attributed to the short-term loan that we had to take out for the ops facility. And that'll be paid off next year is the last year for that.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question with regards to that. Why are we choosing to count the $600,000 for that loan as being a reduction from reserves as opposed to a payment out of the overall budget? Why is it earmarked in that fashion?
Thanks for that, Councillor McIsaac. This goes back to the funding strategy that was presented to council by Ms. Tynan, which was right around the time that I started with the city. And so Mr. Bornowski may want to add some more, but what was discovered at the time is that our accumulated surplus was a very large negative because of historical. I mean, there was really, I think Ms. Tynan found it hard to identify exactly what it was because, but some of the ideas she put forward was because of historical under budgeting and then planning for contributions to reserves, which with money we didn't really have. And so the accumulated surplus line was taking a hit, which is not legal. That can't be negative. And so part of the funding strategy that she came up with then presented to council was to transfer some of our balances in our reserves to accumulated surplus to get it into a positive state, take out this loan to pay for, it was about half of the ops facility because we actually didn't have the money in reserve to pay for it all from reserves. And so in order to balance that, the recommendation was to reduce contributions to reserves while we paid off this loan for 5 years. So that's why I'm directly subtracting it from our shortfall.
Thank you. I felt like there was probably people who were wondering why like the history of how it got to be that way. So I wanted to ask the question so they could all hear it. Yeah.
Thank you. So the remaining gap, which is 378,000, if we were to fund it purely from a tax increase, would amount to about 4.33% of tax increase. The community partner funding levels, an increase in funding to these 5 groups of 1% would amount to an additional 1/20% on our property tax, or excuse me, about $4,700 of city expense, or $1.34 annually for an average single-family home.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Has there been any specific ask from these groups that I don't recall hearing anywhere, but just wondering.
Thanks, Councillor Ramirez. I don't know if you define specific ask as from council. Or...
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm reading this is you probably got this feedback from the community groups somewhere. Like, was there a formal request anywhere?
So formal requests, I think there was only from one, but I did have a meeting with them as I was prepping this budget, and all of them made the comment that their funding has remained stagnant. And then I did ask, I had a slide in a previous meeting that illustrated the percentage of their total budget that came from the city funding. And that percentage varied through the five, but all of them wanted to make it clear that that percentage is dropping. So they, they're having to find additional funds to make up their budget as each year. And they're finding it increasingly difficult, is the feedback I got from them.
Combined with feedback we received from the community in terms of some people wanting us to increase funding to community groups versus others who want us to decrease funding.
That's correct.
Okay.
I believe there was about 2 comments in either direction of the 23 written responses.
Thank you.
And so staff is,
Your worship, if I may, that it may go or it may not bear restating, but that data set is so small that those are representative of individuals' opinions, not of community sentiment at that number of respondents. So those are just representative of those unique individuals' comments rather than something broader. I just wanted to state that out loud so that we recall not to over attribute broad community meaning to a very small data set. Not that we should discount them. They're real humans' input.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but it does then returns to Councillor Ramadas's question, like, why is this a consideration if we haven't received formal requests, I guess is the question. Yeah.
There's a formal resolution from when we established the partnering agreement that was renewed with the Fernie District Arts Council to bring back the option of considering annual percentage increases to partnering agreements. And so we bundled that with all of the partnering agreements together through Britain. So it's in response to council resolution to bring that back for consideration at budget, as it was not advanced as an option at the time of the renewal of the agreement.
Okay, well, that's the clarity we needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And so staff is asking tonight for the following direction from council. I'm preparing a budget bylaw with a specific direction of level of taxation. There's a few options available to council on what a reasonable level of taxation should be, which are listed on this slide. So number one would just be funding the shortfall as it is through taxation is 6.1%. You could utilize funds from the COVID Restart Grant, which has a total balance of $296,000 to offset the tax increase. So every 1% would use up 87.2 thousand of this reserve. You could, option 3 would, you could still utilize that reserve, but then keep the tax increase at 6.1% and put the difference to reserves. I put staff recommended there because, and as I said before, it's ultimately council's decision and it's a question of risk tolerance. And this is kind of my personal risk tolerance is option 3 here. And I really put that there because of the, our major projects in the last couple of years. They've all been over budget, and we're taking more and more hits to our reserves, which we keep saying are underfunded as they are. And it's hard to imagine that getting better. So, and we've had some discussion in previous budget meetings about us being in this situation because of maybe the last 30 years of small tax increases. And my personal feeling is that we should try our best not to keep it going for the next 30 years. We're as reasonable.
And sorry, Mr. Burditt, but to my question earlier, and just so I'm absolutely clear, option 3 doesn't create a preloaded deficit for 2025.
Thanks for that question. So it would keep the 6.1% revenue coming in. Mm-hmm. But let's say you use 2% to offset pool increased revenue and put an additional 2% in reserves, which would be $74,000. Next year, if you would still have that additional 6.1% coming in, but then you would have to make a decision on where that $174,000 would go next year. Because if it stays going into that reserve, then you're going to have the 174,000 shortfall in operating expenses to make up.
Yeah. So this is effectively option 3 is a 1-year transfer. I know that's not the right word. Transfer to reserves.
Yeah. In essence, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But because it increases the tax by 6.1%, you would have that added flexibility of potentially reducing that reserve that we topped up this year, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
if that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Option 4 would be to increase the tax increase more than 6.1%, and then just increase contributions to reserves. And option 5 always is to direct staff otherwise. And so I will go back to the previous slide, but just a reminder of next steps would be first, second readings of this proposed bylaw at next week's regular meeting of council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McIsaac.
First, a question, Your Worship. Would you like us to put a motion on the table and then debate it, or would you like us to have a discussion and then settle on a motion at the end?
A very good question. Well, my instinct is to say put a motion on the table and let's discuss it.
If that is the case, then I would like to motion option 3.
Mr. McCone.
If I may, then, so option 3 would be essentially that staff be directed to prepare a draft 2024 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 6.1% and to utilize funds from the COVID restart grant to enable increased contributions to reserves, but I'm not sure I can take that. But that's the point, is to use to prepare the operating fund budget to include property taxation revenue increase of 6.1% and to utilize COVID funds in 2024.
Yeah, so and putting the motion on the table, it is my understanding that this particular motion would mean that we would be going forward with a 6.1% tax increase, that we would be using the COVID restart money to fund the gaining of operational levels at the aquatic center, and the monies that would be saved from the aquatic center would then therefore be transferred into reserves. That, as the motioner of that option, that is what my expectation will be the outcome.
And is that sufficiently accurate, Mr. Burden?
Yes. The only variables that council may want to discuss in that case would be how much of the COVID restart grant, whether it's all of it or half of it or 2% tax increase worth, and potentially which reserves to put that money towards, which I kind of leave in Mr. McConnell's hands of word phrasing that too.
Well, and if I may, Your Worship, I would like to make the first resolution relatively, I don't know if you want to put in 20 different terms in the resolution, right? So the way I currently
for the purpose of the discussion, I think relatively simply, as Councilor McIsaac suggested, would probably get us where we need to go, and if it were successful, refine the output.
Right. So I would submit then, and Councilor McIsaac's prepared to accept this, that staff be directed to prepare a draft 2024 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 6.1% and to use COVID funds, and I've lost that, COVID grant or restart grant in 2024. Enabling opportunity for, that first part is use the COVID funds restart grant in 2024 is the end of the resolution, which would then enable conversation around the amount.
I would like to ensure that in the wording of the resolution.
Can you go back
that-
to the resolution, please?
That it includes that level of money, if we're going to use the entire COVID restart funding, that level of money would go entirely into the reserves. This is and I'd be happy, Your Worship, to speak to the motion, assuming that I can get a seconder and get it on the table. Specifically, why I'm want to ensure that particular portion of the wording is in the motion.
Okay, so now that Mr. Purdy has put this matter back on the slide, I would ask then, if this is the motion that Councillor McKenzie intends to make, that staff be directed to prepare a draft 2024 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 6.1% and to utilize funds from the COVID restart grant in the amount of $296,000 to maintain the tax increase, but to allow for the increase of contributions to reserves.
Yes.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hamilton. Discussion. Discussion, Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've all been sitting here through the last number of meetings. It will come as no shock to anyone that the single largest challenge that we have in our community right now, besides even speaking to the capital projects, is the chronic shortfall of reserve funding that we have been doing. As Director Burdett said earlier, we've had decades of under taxation, leading to the inability of the community to tackle projects when we need to, leading to sudden increases in tax funding, which we, in order to make up for shortfalls, borrowing, which we've had to do because we didn't have the money in reserves, and so on. I'm challenging this council to not let that same behavior continue. We just this year alone, even with doing this and so on, we have $4.5 million in contributions going into reserves and $7.5 million coming out. That cannot continue for very many years. And then there are no reserves. And then our tax increase is not 6%. It starts to be 18 and 25, or like we're seeing out in Osoyoos, 39 being put on the table, which they've dropped down to 24, but only because they're deferring cost till next year. They're still going to have to pay for it. This is the thing. This is not household budgets. We can't just choose to stop having avocado toast and going to movies on Sundays. Everything here has to get paid for, and it's ongoing. Shorting the reserves is directly reaching into the taxpayer's pocketbook in the future. Today, we're doing it right now. We can keep kicking the can down the road. We can keep charging the citizens and the community's children more money. We can keep doing that, or we can put a responsible taxation level forward around 6% and make a commitment to get back to the point where we're fulfilling our reserve funds appropriately. I would very much like to see us over the long term. Let's start taking the mine tax sharing and using that in our reserves. We should stop using that as a crux. Let's tax appropriately. Let's do the jobs appropriately. You just heard from the roads earlier. Choosing not to continue to invest in that just costs more money. Like there's no solutions where we don't pay. So it's either choosing to pay now in a responsible fashion at an affordable level for the vast majority of people in our community, or choosing to make it much more unaffordable for many more people later. Those are the two simple choices that are on the table. I feel this is a good first step. Quite honestly, I would like to see more money going into reserves, but I think this is a responsible first step, and I'd like this to be laying the groundwork for more reserve contributions in the future, not less.
Thank you. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. The goal of the council is not necessarily to keep a very pristine reserve fund either. We ought to be mindful of the taxpayers. We are in a high inflation environment and people are suffering. We have seen it in our citizen satisfaction survey, not so much here, but on this satisfaction survey as well. So while I appreciate that, there are upcoming costs and expenses that we need to incur to keep our infrastructure in place, we have to be mindful of household taxes and household budget. I would love to have big reserves. I would love to have spending going to the right places. But at the end of the day, we are here to serve the citizens, and the citizens are suffering. So we got to be mindful of that. So I am not in favor of 6.3%, Your Worship. I would like to use the COVID grant fund to kind of soften the blow a little bit. A percentage point, 2 percentage points, I would be happy to endorse that. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. We're in this position because we have, as Councillor McIsaac articulated, we have artificially kept our tax rates low over the years by not investing in reserves, by not investing in ensuring that the future looks good for our children. As a parent, and one of the commitments I made to my family and to the people that I talked to before I ran again was to make sure that I left this organization in a better place than when I started. Underfunding our reserves at this juncture does not accomplish that goal for me. I'm okay with the 6.1% increase this year. However, I'd much rather see we just kind of move to a standard 8% or 7% or whatever. 4 years ago, we were sitting here and we were discussing the challenges that families were facing because of the pandemic. We kept it at a 0% tax increase. That has kicked the can down the road that we're now facing again. Keeping it underfunded again, we're not accomplishing anything. We are just moving the problem in. Are things going to get better in 2-3 years? Maybe, maybe not. So at the end of the day, we're going to have to pay. It's going to be a lot easier and a lot more palatable if we start taking small bites as opposed to trying to eat the whole thing at once.
Other comments? Councillor Ida Kelly.
I just want to make sure that I've understood CFO properly. Once our loan is paid off, the 600,000 that we're currently using to pay that loan could all go into reserves? Okay.
Yes.
And just further, Your Worship, I just also want to point out, I think we do have to be cognizant of families because we aren't their only tax. For example, there's going to be a carbon tax increase that's going to affect affordability for everyone. So I just want to throw that out there, that we can't look at our tax rate in isolation of the costs that everybody has to pay.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So what Councillor McIsaac said, plus just looking at this, the entire scenario to increase by 25%. If I understand it, that means that we're under contributing. We're asking our roads and buildings and fleet and all that stuff to have 25% more life to it. And that's the actual amount that we're short by $1 million, right? So I'm all in favor of this motion. I want to see that money go towards the reserves. I was a little bit saddened when we couldn't just take it directly and put it in. It was like being given an allowance and then, being told you can only spend it on comic books and bubblegum instead of putting it into your bank account. So I want to see this. I want to see our reserves topped up. And I think we're cheating the future if we don't put it in. If we actually want to go and look at getting our reserves back up to scenario 1, the standard life service, this standard service life, we're looking at a 25% tax increase. So I mean, this is a great step forward. I love this motion. I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you, Councillor Schussman.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Well, Councillor McIsaac makes some excellent points, as does the rest of the table here. I find that the discussion we're having is a bit of a false dichotomy. I ran in large part because I was concerned over the state of our infrastructure and the state of our finances. And that does come from these taxes, and these taxes do go to important things. But the issue is that the discussion that we always have, that's been had at this table for 20, 30 years, centers around the money coming in and the reserve funding. Whenever there's talk of cuts or talk of a problem, it comes from reserves. And the average taxpayer is 100% fine with funding our sewage plant, the CNL right away, the fire hall, maybe not the fire hall, but get my drift. Asphalt, certainly. But what they're not okay with is the overall size and scale of this organization, the 103 different things that we do. And I'm sad that the discussion has come to the point where when faced with this tax or not the tax increase, the shortfall is going to be made up by the pot of money that would otherwise be fixing our pipes. I share actually the sentiments of everybody on the table and what they've said, but for those reasons and not reasons of opposing putting money in reserves, I'm leaning not in favor of this.
Thank you. Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Worship. I really appreciate what Councillor Shoesmith just said. Unfortunately, while I think the sentiment is very valid, I think it's slightly misplaced in this discussion, and here's why I say that. Virtually all of the decisions that Councillor Shoesmith has talking about happened over the last year. Every time a decision came to the table and we were asked, do you want to increase spending for X? Do you want to pay for Y? Do you want to do Z? Every time we said yes, that's what added to the number. Every single discussion that comes here where there is a financial item on it, the question should be asked at the time. Is this increasing the operational cost year in, year out? And if so, do we need it? So things like fleet replacement and pipe replacements and so on, and sure, we all support that basic infrastructure. Couldn't agree with Councillor Shoesmith more. But sitting at the table right now and trying to retcon our decisions from 6 months ago and say, well, maybe we shouldn't have done the spending then, let's figure out the cut now. No, all year long at every single meeting when we're presented with a cost is the time to make the adjustment so that the end number at the end of the year is appropriate. So that's when we're going, no, we didn't add this much more to the operational cost because we didn't do these, we chose not to do these things because they're additive in that regard. Like, again, this comes back to this. Right now, the discussions is preparing for the future. That's what the 6.1% is about. That's what about the reserve contribution is about. But those extra costs and so on, they happen at every meeting all year. That's when we need to be making those decisions to manage those costs. Thank you.
Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. And somehow I and Councillor McIsaac are agreeing on this one, and which is one of the reasons why I oppose many of the service increases through this year. And this was exactly the reason why I did that, because I didn't want to be in this situation where I'm staring at a 6.5% tax hike. And this also goes back to the other ask, Your Worship. If you remember, a couple of us have been asking about the strategic priorities or dashboards and kind of understanding, where we are in terms of our expenses through the year, and is there a chance for us to course correct through the year? And this was precisely why I kept asking for that question, because I didn't want to be in the situation end of the year staring at a number. Like, if I had a choice to actually course correct and bring it back to like a 4% or a 5% increase, I would have said okay. And despite asking this many times over through the year, we did not get that work product that we were asking for. And that's why we are here. And this is also one of the reasons why I am opposed to this tax hike, because I didn't sign up for this.
Other comments? Councillor Nixon.
to, reply to Councillor Ramadas, it's like, we could have all those things if we build capacity in the organization, which means we would have to add people. So we've seen how skinny our organization is. We have a communications department of one person. We have a finance department of 3 people, 6 people. I mean, we have an HR department of 1 person. I mean, we're running pretty skinny right now. So I think that I'm still in favor of motion 3.
Councillor Otter Kelly.
I'm just going to speak a little bit in support of what Councillor Ramadas said, because we did really ask for those metrics. And also, I'm going to reference the organizational review that was done. There were staff positions added from that recommended review. So there were actually staff positions added. So yes, we don't have zillions of extra staff members, that's true. But a lot of the organizational review stuff was implemented.
And I would just like to comment that, I very much appreciate the perspectives of the entire council, and I very much appreciate this council because we actually built into our strategic plan that we would consider the impact of taxation on our residents. So that was a very important part of our strategic plan, and we all agreed on that, and it means the same thing in many respects to all of us, and means slightly different things to all of us at a inflection point like this, at a juncture like this. I tend to agree with Councillor McIsaac's perspective that while we need to protect the taxpayer of today and the taxpayer of tomorrow, most of whom will be the same taxpayer. And reducing the tax this year, as we've seen, will only start us at a deficit next year. And we need to make these decisions with the best information we have at the time. And there's, just this morning, of course, we heard that inflation in Canada has gone down, and it has surprised any number of economists and Bank of Canada and others. But we ultimately can't rely on any of that. We've got major world events coming up, an election south of the border, an election in Canada, a provincial election here. We don't know what the outcomes of all those events will be in terms of inflation, stability. We need to look after the people of Fernie to the best of our ability, and saving for the future, in my mind, is key to that. To the degree that we can, I like the language that's been used. This is a small incremental step to replenishing our reserves that saves for the future. And I'm very much in favor of us doing that as a council, that we are looking after the taxpayer of today. We're providing them the services that they request and they desire. And we're maintaining those service levels through 2024. And we're putting money away for the future, for projects that are coming, projects that we don't foresee, cost overruns through inflation or supply chain issues that we may see in the future that we can't anticipate. We need to be prepared for those. We've seen that. We've seen that hit us continuously since I joined council. We need to buffer ourselves and our residents against that. So I think of all the options before us, this is my preferred option. And so, I very much appreciate the perspective of all of council. And I think, as Mr. Burdett, Mr. Boranowski, and staff have heard this evening, there are some tool refinement that we maybe need to prioritize. And that we can discuss that certainly in future council meetings, but I can get working on that. But yeah, in my mind, I think this is the best solution for us today and going forward. So with that, I will,
If I may, Your Worship, without amending the intent of the motion, we would like to have a couple minutes to actually paper a very strong motion as opposed to what I just read out. If I could have a brief recess.
oh, I think that's appropriate. Absolutely. Can we-
And then, because it seems like you're about to call the question.
I
So.
was, yeah.
So with respect to that, the goal would be to ensure that we're talking about ensuring that it's the 6.1%, all the Safe Restart Grant Fund is used, and that contributions to reserves is implemented within that 6.1%. So that will be the language that we bring back. Main goal is to ensure that the language we're using respects the permissions of the Safe Restart Grant. Right, that's the goal of the intent of getting the resolution.
Absolutely.
So if I may, but
How much time would you like?
no
10
more than 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Ms. Rhodes, can we recess for 5 minutes? Thank you. Welcome back.
Right. Would you like me to read this, Your Worship?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the resolution as drafted with the intent of course, like and I apologize, the one I read out quickly was trying to create some stuff. So I appreciate the opportunity to make sure that staff, the council is happy with this resolution. Staff be directed to prepare a draft 2024 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 6.1%, utilizing the remaining COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant for Local Governments Fund and the increasing the general capital reserve by the same amount.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, is the general capital reserve the same as the financial stability reserve?
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. No, general capital would be our least encumbered reserve, which is why we chose that one. But it can be used for capital projects or operating projects as well. Whereas the financial stability is really just intended for operating emergencies, should it be needed.
Thanks for the clarification. So I would look to the mover and the seconder. Are you comfortable with those amendments to the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the language is consistent with my motion.
I will continue to second it.
Thank you. With that, I will call the question. All those in favor? You've got the 4? Yeah. And those opposed? 3 opposed.
And I'll verify it's Councillors Ramadas, Shoesmith, and Ardia Kelly.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I know these are not easy discussions and not easy decisions. I would just look to Mr. Burdett and Mr. Bornowski. So just to recap next steps.
Thank you. Next steps would be the first and second reading of this bylaw next week's regular council meeting. At which point there will be the regular public input period at the start of the meeting, and then there'll be a second one immediately after reading.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our business. And with that, we will call the meeting adjourned at 9:15 p.m. Thank you, Council, and thank you everyone who's joined us.